What would make a billionaire stop his car in the middle of a storm? A moment so small, yet powerful enough to change his heart forever. Rain was falling hard over Bellevue, Washington, the kind that comes out of nowhere and soaks everything in seconds. Most people would have hurried inside, but not her. From the back seat of his black sedan, Julian Reddington, one of the richest men in the state, noticed a figure sitting near the garden bench at the far end of his estate. At first, he thought it was a gardener caught off guard, but as the car slowed and the wipers cleared the windshield, he saw her clearly. A woman, drenched from head to toe, holding a sandwich wrapped in a plastic bag, her hands trembling slightly as she tried to eat without her food getting wet. Julian frowned. "Stop the car." His driver hesitated. "Sir, it's pouring. You'll get—" "I said stop." The tires crunched over the gravel and Julian stepped out, the cold rain biting against his skin. He pulled up his collar, walking toward the woman. She didn't see him at first. She was too busy wiping her face with her sleeve, shielding her sandwich as if it were a treasure. Then she looked up. Her eyes widened, not in fear, but embarrassment. "Mr. Reddington," she said softly. "I'm sorry. I didn't realize. Why are you out here?" His tone was sharp, automatic. Years of commanding boardrooms had shaped his voice into something that always expected an answer. "I was just eating my lunch," she said, standing quickly. "I didn't want to bother anyone inside." He noticed her name tag, soaked and barely hanging on. Elena Marquez, one of the newer maids. He remembered her face only vaguely, quiet, polite, always working in the background. "You couldn't eat in the kitchen?" Her answer came with hesitation. "Staff aren't allowed to use the dining area during your lunch hour, sir." Julian blinked. The rule was his, one of dozens he'd signed when he'd first hired his household manager. At the time, it made sense. Order, boundaries, professionalism. He hadn't thought twice about it. Now, standing in the rain, watching her try to smile through her shivering, something felt wrong. Deeply wrong. He looked at the sandwich in her hands. Cheap white bread, a thin slice of ham, no cheese, no spread. The kind of meal someone makes when they're just trying to stretch the week's groceries. "You could have eaten in the garage at least," he muttered. Her voice cracked slightly, but she forced a polite tone. "It's fine, sir. The rain doesn't bother me." He almost said something else, something defensive, but stopped. There was a silence between them, one that felt heavier than the rain. Julian turned and walked back to the car, his shoes sinking slightly into the wet grass. But before he opened the door, he looked back one more time. She was sitting again, quietly eating, eyes lowered, face calm. And for the first time in a long while, Julian Reddington didn't feel powerful. He just felt human. But that brief, strange encounter in the rain would haunt him more than he could have imagined. Julian Reddington's mornings were a machine. Every second planned, every step predictable. He woke at 5:30 a.m. sharp, ran 3 miles on his private treadmill, drank his protein shake, and reviewed the market reports on his tablet while his assistant prepped his schedule. No noise, no interruptions, just precision. He lived in a glass and steel mansion on the edge of Lake Sammamish, a place that reflected him perfectly, cold, efficient, beautiful, but lifeless. There was no laughter, no music, no family photographs. Just clean lines and expensive art pieces he didn't even remember buying. His staff moved quietly through the house like shadows, well-trained and invisible. That's how he liked it. He paid them generously, but he didn't want familiarity. No birthdays, no personal talk, no distractions. The rulebook he'd written years ago still hung in the staff kitchen, a printed list of do's and don'ts. No personal meals in guest areas. No speaking unless spoken to. No emotional display during working hours. Julian told himself it was professionalism, but deep down, it was control. The company he'd built, Reddington Dynamics, a global software empire, was born from that same obsession. He'd grown up poor in a cramped apartment in Spokane, watching his father lose job after job, watching his mother cry over unpaid bills. Chaos, he decided, was weakness, so he spent his life building walls against it. Now, at 41, he had everything. 3 cars worth more than most people's homes, a private chef, a personal driver, and the kind of power that made CEOs nervous when he walked into a room. But power came with isolation. His ex-wife, Harper, had left 5 years earlier saying she couldn't live in a museum where no one's allowed to touch anything. He hadn't argued, he just signed the papers. The staff learned to keep their distance after that, especially the maids. They saw how quickly his mood could shift, from polite to commanding, from quiet to sharp. He never yelled, but his silence was enough to make anyone shrink. Still, he wasn't cruel. He paid bonuses on time, covered medical emergencies. He thought that was enough. But it wasn't kindness, it was management. That rainy afternoon with Elena kept replaying in his mind. Every time he tried to focus, he saw her face, wet hair, trembling hands, the sandwich. He didn't know why it bothered him so much. At dinner that evening, his plate sat untouched. The roasted salmon, perfectly seasoned, went cold as he stared at the reflection of rain streaking down the window. His butler, Raymond, approached cautiously. "Sir, will you be needing anything else tonight?" Julian shook his head. "No, you can all go home early." Raymond hesitated, surprised. That never happened. "Very well, sir." The house grew quiet again, too quiet. Julian pushed his plate aside and leaned back, rubbing his temples. He told himself it didn't matter. She was just an employee, following the rules. But then he remembered her voice. "The rain doesn't bother me. Why would someone say that unless they were used to discomfort?" He sighed, picked up his phone, and opened the staff roster. Elena Marquez, age 34, hired 7 months ago, works morning and afternoon shifts, lives in Renton, single mother. He closed the screen and set the phone down. For some reason, the room felt colder than usual. But the more he tried to ignore that image of her in the rain, the heavier it pressed on his conscience. For Elena Marquez, life had never been simple. Every morning started before sunrise in her tiny apartment in Renton. The heater clicked weakly, the air smelled faintly of detergent, and the sound of her 9-year-old daughter's breathing reminded her why she kept going. "Wake up, Sophia," she whispered one morning, brushing a strand of hair off her daughter's cheek. "You've got school in an hour." Sophia yawned and mumbled, "Can you stay today?" Elena smiled softly, even though her chest tightened. "You know I can't, mi amor. Mr. Reddington needs the house spotless by noon." Sophia nodded sleepily. "He must be really important." Elena paused before replying. "He is, but that doesn't make him happier than us." The truth was, working at Reddington's mansion was both a blessing and a weight. The pay was better than any cleaning job she'd had before, but the rules were heavy. No talking, no resting in the common areas, and absolutely no mistakes. Every movement was watched, every silence expected. Most days she ate lunch standing in the laundry room, surrounded by the hum of dryers, but that afternoon, the staff dining corner was being disinfected, and she didn't want to risk breaking any rules, so she went outside, thinking the drizzle would stay light. She'd grown up in Tacoma. Rain never scared her, but when it turned into a downpour, she decided to finish her sandwich anyway. Food was food. She wasn't about to waste it. She didn't know Julian had seen her until he walked up in his dark coat, looking more like a judge than a boss. The rain hit his shoulders like silver needles, but he didn't flinch. She remembered how his eyes, usually distant, had softened for a second before hardening again. After he left, she sat there for a long time, pretending to finish her sandwich, even though her appetite was gone. Her hands shook, not from cold, but from embarrassment. She hadn't done anything wrong, but somehow, she still felt small. Later that evening, back at home, she found Sophia at the kitchen table doing homework by candlelight. The power had gone out again. "You okay, Mama?" the little girl asked. Elena forced a smile. "Just tired. Work was long today." Sophia pushed her a crayon drawing, a stick figure of Elena holding a mop and smiling. Above it, in crooked letters, it said, "My mom works hard for me." She swallowed the lump in her throat. "It's beautiful," she said softly, hugging her daughter tight. After Sophia went to bed, Elena sat by the window, watching the rain slide down the glass. She thought about her life before this job, cleaning hotel rooms, juggling shifts, taking buses across the city. This job was supposed to make things easier, and in a way, it had. But something about that afternoon made her feel more exposed than she had in years. She didn't want pity. She wanted respect. And though she didn't know it, that single act of eating in the rain, born out of quiet endurance, had shaken something deep inside the man who had everything. But change, no matter how small, rarely comes without resistance. And the next morning, something unexpected happened at the mansion. The next morning, the sky was clear, the air sharp with the smell of wet pine. The storm had passed, but the memory of it hadn't. Julian sat in his study, surrounded by walls of glass that framed the lake outside. He was supposed to be preparing for a shareholder meeting, but his thoughts refused to cooperate. The image of Elena sitting in the rain kept replaying like a movie he couldn't pause. At 9 sharp, Raymond entered, holding the day's itinerary. "Your 9:30 call with Singapore, sir, and Mrs. Langley from HR wanted to confirm the quarterly bonus structure for domestic staff." Julian raised an eyebrow. "The bonus structure?" "Yes, sir." "She said you requested it last night," Julian blinked. "I did?" Then he remembered, the restless night, the decision he'd almost made but hadn't written down. "Right. Have her bring the files up." While he waited, he glanced through the security feed on his tablet. Habit, control. But there she was again, Elena, pushing a cleaning cart down the marble hallway, hair tied back neatly, her posture straight despite the heavy load. No sign of complaint, no wasted movement. He zoomed in slightly, then stopped himself. It wasn't right. She was his employee, not a subject of curiosity. Still, something about her calmness intrigued him. Minutes later, he found himself walking down to the main floor, telling himself he was just checking on things. He found her in the kitchen, scrubbing the counters. "Elena," he said. She froze for half a second, then turned, polite but cautious. "Good morning, Mr. Reddington." He noticed she didn't meet his eyes at first. "About yesterday," he began, his tone more formal than he intended. "You shouldn't have to eat outside." "It's all right, sir," she said quickly. "The rules are clear." "I understand." He frowned. "Do you, though? Because it's absurd. You work here all day and can't sit inside to eat?" Her lips parted slightly, unsure how to respond. "I didn't make the rules." He sighed, rubbing his forehead. "I know. I did." That admission hung in the air for a few seconds, heavy and strange. She didn't move, didn't smile, just watched him with quiet confusion. He glanced at her hands, rough from cleaning chemicals, a small scar across one knuckle. He'd never noticed details like that before. "Where do you live?" he asked suddenly. She hesitated. "Renton, sir." "That's an hour away." "You commute every day?" "Yes, 2 buses, then I walk from the stop." He looked genuinely surprised. "That must be exhausting." She shrugged. "It's what I can afford." Something twisted in his chest. He thought of his own garage, 3 cars he barely drove, and this woman spending 4 hours a day just getting to and from work. "Elena," he said finally, "from now on, you and the staff can use the kitchen during your breaks. No more rules about separation." She blinked, unsure she'd heard right. "Are you serious?" "I don't say things I don't mean." A faint smile crossed her face, small but sincere. "Thank you, sir." He nodded and turned to leave, but then paused. "And next time it rains, eat inside." She chuckled softly, the first real sound of warmth he'd ever heard from her. "I will." As he walked back to his office, Julian felt something he hadn't in years, a quiet sense of discomfort mixed with relief. He couldn't quite name it, but it made him question more than just his house rules. For the first time, he wondered how many other people around him lived quietly under the weight of rules he'd created, rules meant to keep order, but that really just kept people apart. That night, when he passed through the kitchen to grab a glass of water, he saw something he'd never seen before. His staff, sitting together, laughing softly as they ate. Elena was there, her hair still damp from cleaning, her smile bright and real. Julian didn't say a word. He just watched for a moment, then walked away with a strange tightness in his chest. But peace never lasts long in a house built on silence. And the very next day, someone decided to challenge his sudden change of heart. By the next morning, word had spread across the mansion like wildfire. The staff could hardly believe it. Julian Reddington had changed a rule. Not just any rule, but one of his oldest, strictest ones. Some were thrilled, others were suspicious. In the laundry room, 2 of the housekeepers whispered over folded towels. "You think he's serious?" one asked. "He said it himself," the other replied. Elena was there. "Yeah, but people like him don't just change overnight." Elena heard them, but kept her focus. She didn't want attention. The last thing she needed was to be seen as the reason their boss suddenly started softening up. But the truth was, Something about that moment in the kitchen, the way he'd looked genuinely uncomfortable, almost regretful, had stayed with her. Still, not everyone saw it as a good thing. That afternoon, Patricia Langley, the house manager, came storming into the pantry, her heels clicking like tiny hammers. "Elena, a word." Elena froze mid-motion. "Yes, ma'am?" Patricia crossed her arms. "Mr. Reddington spoke to you yesterday, didn't he?" "Yes, ma'am." "And he told you to ignore established staff protocol?" Elena swallowed. "He said we could eat in the kitchen during breaks." Patricia's jaw tightened. "Do you have any idea how long I've kept this house running without a single complaint from him? You don't just change rules because you feel like it. I didn't ask him to, but he did, didn't he?" "Didn't he?" Patricia's voice rose. "Now everyone thinks I've been unfair. Do you know how that makes me look?" Elena took a small step back. "I'm sorry if it caused trouble. I only did what I was told." Patricia stared at her for a long moment, lips pursed. "You may be the new favorite right now, but that won't last. Don't forget your place." The words hit hard, but Elena said nothing. She just nodded, lowering her eyes. That evening, after the last shift, Julian walked into the kitchen again. He found the staff finishing their dinner, laughter soft but genuine. The sight made something inside him relax. But then he noticed the tension when Patricia entered. The laughter stopped instantly. "Everything all right?" he asked. Patricia straightened. "Of course, sir. Just making sure your new policies are being followed." There was something in her tone he didn't like. "Patricia," he said calmly, "I made that decision because it was the right thing to do. If there's an issue, bring it to me." Her smile was thin. "Of course, Mr. Reddington." After she left, Elena quietly began stacking plates. Julian noticed the small tremor in her hands. "She gave you trouble, didn't she?" he asked. Elena froze, not wanting to cause problems. "It's fine, sir." He leaned against the counter. "You said that yesterday too." "But it's not fine." For a moment, she didn't answer. Then softly, "She's just doing her job. She's been here a long time. Change makes people nervous." He nodded slowly. "I know something about that." They both smiled faintly at the same time. For a split second, the barrier between them, the line between employer and employee, felt thinner. Later that night, Julian sat by the fireplace, the flames reflecting in his glass of scotch. He couldn't stop thinking about Patricia's anger, the staff's silence, Elena's calmness. For years, he'd told himself that structure kept everything in order, but now he wasn't so sure. He remembered being a kid, hiding under the kitchen table while his parents argued about rent. Back then, he'd promised himself he'd never be powerless again. But somehow, in his quest to control everything, he'd ended up isolating himself from the world entirely. He stared into the fire, thinking of Elena's soaked sandwich, her soft voice saying, "The rain doesn't bother me." Maybe the rain didn't bother her, because she'd learned to live with storms he'd never even felt. But that realization would soon lead him to make a choice that would change both their lives forever. The following week, Julian returned home early from a meeting in downtown Seattle. The house was unusually quiet. No footsteps, no chatter, not even the distant sound of cleaning equipment. Something felt off. He found Raymond in the hallway, carrying a box of cleaning supplies. "Where is everyone?" Julian asked. Raymond hesitated. "Most of the staff left early, sir." Mrs. Langley gave the order. "She said there'd been a change in scheduling?" Julian frowned. "I didn't approve any change." Raymond hesitated again, lowering his voice. "It's about Elena, sir." Julian's chest tightened. "What about her?" "She was dismissed this morning." He blinked. "Dismissed? For what?" Raymond looked genuinely uncomfortable. Mrs. Langley said it was due to insubordination. Apparently, she was caught eating in the main kitchen after hours. Julian's voice sharpened. "After I told her she could?" "I believe so, sir." Without another word, Julian headed straight for the staff office. Patricia Langley was there, sorting papers with an air of satisfaction. She looked up, startled when he pushed open the door. "Mr. Reddington," she began, forcing a smile, "I didn't expect you so soon." "What's this about firing Elena Marquez?" he asked, his voice even but dangerously calm. "She broke protocol, sir," Patricia replied. "Twice. I warned her after the first time, but I changed that protocol," he cut in. "Do you recall that conversation?" Patricia's smile faltered. Yes, but, sir, I've been managing this household for over 10 years. When we start bending rules, things fall apart. Respect is earned through consistency. He stepped closer. Respect is earned through humanity, Patricia, not fear. For the first time, her confidence cracked. Sir, with all due respect. No, he interrupted, voice low but firm. You don't get to talk about respect when you humiliate someone for following my direct instruction. She swallowed hard, then tried to regain composure. Mr. Reddington, if you reinstate her, it will undermine— Enough, he said, his tone final. She's rehired. Effective immediately, and you will personally apologize to her for your behavior. Her mouth opened in protest, but one look from him ended it. She nodded stiffly and left the room. Julian stood there for a moment, exhaling slowly. He wasn't sure if he was angry at her or at himself for letting it get that far. He found Elena in the driveway a few minutes later, her uniform damp from drizzle, her small duffel bag in hand. "Elena," he called out. She turned, surprised. "Mr. Reddington? I was just leaving." "You're not," he said quickly. "You've been reinstated. Patricia had no right to dismiss you." Her brows furrowed. "Sir, I don't want to cause trouble. She's your manager." "She works for me," Julian said, "and so do you. Which means if there's a problem, I handle it, not her." She looked down, unsure how to respond. "Thank you, sir, but maybe it's better if I don't come back. It's been uncomfortable for everyone." He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "You didn't do anything wrong. You followed my instruction. I'm the one who created an environment where doing the right thing feels dangerous. That's on me." For a moment, she just stared at him, unsure if she should believe what she was hearing. "Why are you doing this?" she asked softly. He hesitated, then admitted, "Because you reminded me what real strength looks like. And I forgot what that meant a long time ago." The wind carried a faint chill, but neither moved. She finally nodded. "I'll stay, if you're sure." "I'm sure," he said. As she walked back toward the house, Julian felt something shift inside him. A mix of guilt, relief, and a strange new respect. He turned toward the lake, watching raindrops hit the water. For once, he didn't hurry back to shelter. He just stood there, letting it fall. But what started as a small act of decency would soon grow into something much deeper, something neither of them expected. Over the next few weeks, something subtle but unmistakable changed in the Reddington mansion. The silence that once ruled the halls began to soften. The staff no longer tiptoed. Conversations lingered. Even laughter, quiet and uncertain at first, started to return to the rooms that had long forgotten it. Julian noticed it one morning as he walked through the corridor on his way to his office. He stopped, listening. The faint sound of music drifted from the kitchen, an old Spanish song playing from someone's phone. Normally, he would have ordered it turned off immediately, but not this time. He found Elena wiping down the counters, humming along quietly as she worked. The melody was gentle, almost nostalgic. "That song," Julian said, surprising even himself by speaking first. "Where's it from?" She turned, startled but smiling. "It's one my mother used to play when I was little. Helps the day go faster." He nodded slowly. "It's nice." She looked amused. "You don't seem like someone who listens to music." "I didn't used to." There was an awkward pause, but it wasn't the cold kind they used to share. It was warm, human. He found himself staying longer than he meant to, just to listen. Later that day, Julian asked his driver to drop him off 2 blocks away from the usual corporate lunch spot. He'd told his assistant he wanted to walk, but the truth was he needed air, needed distance from the endless glass towers and the sound of people pretending to care about numbers. He ended up near a small park by a grocery store where he saw something that stopped him in his tracks. Elena, again. She wasn't in uniform this time. She wore a simple denim jacket, her hair loose, her daughter beside her. They were sitting on a bench, sharing a cup of soup. The little girl's laughter carried through the crisp air, bright and unfiltered. Elena looked happy in a way he hadn't seen before, peaceful, grounded. For a moment, he didn't move. He just watched from a distance. When she finally noticed him, her eyes widened slightly. "Mr. Reddington?" He felt awkward immediately. "Sorry, I didn't mean to intrude." She smiled faintly. "You're fine. This is my daughter, Sophia." Sophia waved shyly. Hi. Julian's expression softened. Hi there. The little girl grinned. Mom says you're her boss. Elena laughed softly, her cheeks pink. Yes, he is. Julian crouched slightly so he wasn't towering over them. Your mom's the hardest worker I've ever met. You must be proud, Sophia nodded. I am. She's the best. For some reason, those words hit him harder than he expected. He glanced at Elena, who was trying not to look emotional herself. I was just grabbing coffee nearby, he said finally. Didn't expect to run into you here. She shrugged. We come here sometimes after I get paid. Sophia likes the swings. He looked at the park around them, modest, nothing fancy, but full of life. People talking, kids laughing, the smell of food from a nearby vendor. It was everything his mansion wasn't. Mind if I join you for a minute? He asked. Elena looked hesitant, but she nodded. Sure. They sat there, watching Sophia play. The silence between them was easy this time. No tension, no hierarchy, just two people sharing a moment neither could have predicted months ago. After a while, he said quietly, You know, I built a company to make people's lives easier. And somehow, I forgot what real living looks like. She turned to him, thoughtful. Sometimes it takes losing touch to realize what matters. But it's never too late to start again. He smiled faintly. You really believe that? I have to, she said simply. Otherwise, what's the point? Something in her voice, steady, grounded, stayed with him long after they parted ways. That night, back at the mansion, Julian made a decision. He called his HR director and ordered a new benefits plan for all domestic employees. Higher wages, paid leave, health coverage. He didn't even hesitate. When he hung up, he leaned back in his chair, staring out at the city lights. For the first time in years, he didn't feel like he was looking down on the world. He felt connected to it. But his journey wasn't just about fixing a system. It was about rebuilding himself. And soon, he'd find a way to show that change starts with how you treat the people right in front of you. A few months later, the Reddington mansion didn't feel like the same place anymore. It wasn't louder or busier, just warmer. The kind of warmth that doesn't come from heaters or polished marble floors, but from people feeling seen. Julian walked through the kitchen one afternoon to find the staff sharing a meal at the long oak table. There was laughter, conversation, even the faint smell of homemade stew, Elena's recipe. No one scrambled to their feet when he entered anymore. They simply greeted him with respect, not fear. He sat down with them, just like that. No announcement, no performance. Patricia Langley, now visibly more relaxed, served bowls of soup without a word. When she passed him one, he said quietly, "Thank you." It was two small words he hadn't used often enough in his life. Elena looked across the table, smiling softly. "You sure you want to eat with us, sir?" "Might ruin your reputation," Julian chuckled under his breath. "I think that reputation needed ruining." The staff laughed, and for a moment, it felt like family. Later that evening, after everyone left, Julian walked out to the garden where months ago, rain had soaked the grass and changed everything. The bench where he'd first seen Elena still sat under the maple tree. He brushed a bit of dirt off the seat and sat down, letting the cool breeze touch his face. He thought about the man he used to be, the one who measured worth by money, order, and control. He'd built walls around himself, thinking they made him strong. But all they did was keep out compassion, humility, and connection. Now, he understood something simple yet powerful. You don't need billions to make a difference. You just need to care. Elena's quiet strength had taught him that humanity isn't found in grand gestures. It's in the small, everyday acts of kindness that remind people they matter. As rain began to fall again, Julian didn't move. He let it hit his face, slow and steady. Somewhere inside, he could still hear her voice from that first day. "The rain doesn't bother me." He smiled faintly. "Doesn't bother me anymore either," he whispered. Because in learning to see one person's struggle, he'd finally learned how to feel again. Power means nothing if it costs you your humanity. True strength comes from empathy, the courage to listen, to see people, and to treat them as equals, no matter their place in the world. Before you scroll to the next video, ask yourself, how do you treat the people who serve, clean, deliver, or help make your life easier? Sometimes, the smallest act of respect can awaken the best parts of who we are. But maybe that awakening starts with you.